One thing I want you to understand is that men aren't just lonely, brotherhood has collapsed. Brotherhood, as you know, it has collapsed in on itself, and nobody told them. Not because men got weaker, not because women changed, not because feelings got soft. Brotherhood died because the system buried it and taught men to perform masculinity instead of experience it. Because men weren't supposed to live life solo. We know this. We know this. Men weren't supposed to do that. Men were supposed to have each other, though. Not in competition, not in silence, not in dominance, but in witness. In witness. Brotherhood used to mean you weren't grieving alone. You weren't scared alone. You weren't raising your kids alone. You weren't carrying the weight of being a man alone. Right? I'm just saying it. Men were supposed to grow with mirrors and not masks, and when those mirrors disappear, you didn't just lose your friends, you lost yourself. It's a fact, right? The collapse of brotherhood, just so you really get it, the collapse of brotherhood did not make men weak. I am not saying that. It did make them unmirrored. And an unmirrored man will disappear in plain sight. I promise. That's the real epidemic right there in your face. Because a man with no brotherhood has no emotional outlet, no identity formation, no accountability without shame, no place to confess, no place to collapse, no place to be seen. So he turns every struggle inward until it becomes numbness, performance, or rage. That's all he has left. Not because he's dangerous, but because he's unwitnessed. He's unwitnessed. Nobody spots him. And the system loves unwitnessed men. Because guess what unwitnessed men are? Easy to control, easy to radicalize, easy to exhaust, easy to shame, easy to distract, easy to turn against women, and easy to turn against themselves. I'm telling you, they come with the whole package. Because a man without brotherhood will mistake isolation for identity and performance for strength. I'm going to just tell you again. A man without brotherhood will mistake isolation for identity and performance for strength. That's the trap right there, because patriarchy didn't fail men. It starved them and then rewarded them for having bones only. Right? Bones only. It taught me to distrust the only people who could have taught them how to be human. Each other. Right? I'm just being honest. So it replaced brotherhood with competition, hierarchy, silence, shame, the real man stands alone line, and then handed women the job description of being every man's therapist, mirror, mother, and emotional system. It did. Right? It told them to be everything because it required a man to be nothing. That's what it was. Not because women ever changed, though. I don't want you to get stuck on that. It's because men had no men to fall back on. Nobody had your back. And you know that. Nobody was there for you. So because of that, I want you to know that men are not lonely because they don't have women. Men are lonely because they don't have men. That's the saddest part of the whole story. They miss something they never had. They feel nostalgic for a bond that was stolen before they were born. And that ache, that hollowness, that quiet panic that forms under you, that is never weakness. I won't let you call yourself weak here. It's actually the ghost of brotherhood calling your name back home. So the collapse of brotherhood was never a man's failure. It wasn't, but it was the system's strategy. It was the system's strategy. And in its return, that's on us. Right? If we want brotherhood back, it really is going to be on us. Because men don't need to be rescued. Men do need to be reunited. Men need to be reunited. And the world will never heal until brotherhood does. One thing I want you to
Yo, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Truth belongs to God. God has already said this. You know, there's the scripture, oh, how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. As iron sharpens iron, so one brother sharpens another. The other scripture, the older men ought to teach the younger men. You know, I appreciate him talking about this because there is something to be said about the lack of brotherhood that's, I do believe it exists. Let me say that. I do believe it exists, and I believe it, and I know it exists, and I believe it begins with God. It begins with community in church. It begins with being intentional. It begins with confession. It begins with knowing, like, I need brotherhood. And I believe church does a great job. Not a perfect job, but a great job of challenging men to gather together. You know, I know there's going to be somebody in us saying, oh, but church doesn't do brotherhood. Well, some churches struggle with it more than others, but there are some churches that do it well. It's been actually one of the turning points for me because I had turned up the knob on brotherhood, especially moving to a different state and a bigger city. You know, when your relationships are elsewhere, it's not that I didn't have a bond and a sense of brotherhood and accountability, but it's different when, like he said, it's different when you go unwitnessed. or essentially when you go unseen, you know, it's different when you have somebody who can see you week after week, you know, versus, you know, having people you talk to week after week. When you have somebody who can see you and be there intimately with you, have conversation, it's different, but it's important. And I'm not saying because God owns the truth and has already said this, he's right about it. And I'm not saying that there's no practical way to it. I'm not saying it only has to be done in church. What I am acknowledging is that I believe sometimes we forget that God has already said all of these things in his word and has said how important it is for brothers to be and do life together. Yeah, he's called a man to have a wife, right? But he's also called a man to be around men, to do life with men, to be sharpened by men, you know, to be taught by men, and to teach. So I agree. I agree with what he was saying about the need for brotherhood, how important it is, and when there isn't any brotherhood. He says something about you take on isolation as identity and performance for strength. I'm telling you, that was really, he really said something in. It's true. Like you'll see people start to do life alone and it just becomes who they are, who we are. And then, but we also, because we want to feel good about something, how we perform in whatever it may be, our career, our gifts, how we perform in terms of our money, like all those things, we'll take it on as strength. It'll become, as they say, our whole personality, that one or two or maybe several things that we're good at, it becomes our strength versus being in community, being seen, being held accountable, you know, being asked hard questions, having to sit with things, knowing that we have to give a response and an answer for what we've done. That's important, and God has always called us to it. And I'd encourage you, you know, to find not just a church, not to just be right with Jesus, but also to find something practical that helps you, you know, connect with men. I do this at the gym. I do this in terms of just like my aspirations. You know, I spend a Saturday or two out the month where I work on my goals with other brothers, go to the gym with brothers. Of course, I have my church, and then I have my biological blood brothers, and I have brothers back home. Like, I've been like building that for some time, but like I said, as probably the past year or two, year and a half, maybe, like I've been turning up the knob on that by the grace of God. So if you're a man, you know, revisit your brotherhood, you know, area. Ask yourself, reevaluate it, like examine, am I being seen by men that can hold me accountable? Am I around men who can sharpen me? Am I around men who I can sharpen? You know, is brotherhood playing a big role in my life, in my development, in my confidence, in how I live a life before God, and how I treat, you know, humanity, and how I work on my job, and how I treat my wife, or, you know, just in general, like examine these things, examine it, you know, because it's important. It's important for you and I as men to have community, and it's important for women to also not try to like just nag a man into community, but ask how she can support him in finding, you know, community, or ask him, like, you know, in a nice way, like, how can I support you in terms of, you know, growing male friendships, you know, or finding a male community. And I'm not saying ask him this all the time, but ask. Be of support, you know. Don't just be like, you ain't no real, like, don't talk to men that way. There's a way to support it. Sometimes it's asking, sometimes it's praying. But I'll never say just volunteer him, you know what I'm saying? But just pray. God will guide you, you know. Have conversations. There are even practical resources. There are books. I mean, I'm telling you, there's several ways to, you know, help men find community, help men examine themselves, help men be seen by other men and to develop. Because, it's important. It's important because we need it. We need it. I'm gonna make sure I put the link from the video in the description so you can check it out yourself. Leave a comment. Let me know, if you're a man, let me know what you think about community. What have your experiences been with having community and or without community? Maybe there's something, a different take that you have. Put it in the comment section. Let me know what you think. All right, that's all I got to say about that. I'll catch y'all in the next video.